It's Monday morning, everyone. Welcome to Kifarucast. Justin Gaethje, by the way, everyone should check out Justin. He's going to be on the podcast later this week, but he won. I told him I'd mention it. He beat the shit out of Tony Ferguson. But above and beyond that, just as exciting, I have got Dale Perry, owner of Evolution Outdoors. And actually, I'm not going to go over the huge announcement, Dale, of what you've kind of done in the industry. You can kind of give the rundown, but Dale builds a badass broadhead and one of my favorite mechanical broadheads of all time. But Dale, thanks for coming on.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
Give a rundown, man. You had No Limits Archery before, which was the Gravedigger broadhead. I killed a ton of stuff with that. You invented that, and then you kind of tell the history of that, and then how the Jekyll and Hyde broadhead got started, and that, starting Evolution Outdoors.
Yeah, back in 2000, I want to say it was 12, we started, I actually got back into archery. I grew up in archery as a kid and then got out of it and did all the adult stuff and got back into archery. And when I got back in, it was a fixed or mechanical separation line between the two. And when I first said, I think I can build a better broadhead, people laughed at me and said, oh, everything's been done and everything's been designed. And I had a lot of people in the industry basically shrug me off. And so I went to start designing, and the Gravedigger was born after many failures. And it really just kind of started grassroots and no advertising budget and none of that. And when we finally got our patent and we really started getting a market to it, we started really just knocking down animals. And that's what it came down to, is the performance of the broadhead. So that company grew and grew. And in 2015, we were approached by Plano Synergy, and they were interested in buying the product. And so we had a bit of a negotiation with them and finally did that, which was a good and bad thing. I mean, there were things that worked out and things that didn't. And so when I left there, they owned the Gravedigger name and they owned the patents. And so what I looked at doing was designing another head that took all the good things that I had designed, which nothing's ever perfect, and eliminated the bad things. And that's how with Evolution Outdoors, that's how the Jekyll and Hyde were created. And it's been an interesting ride.
I was pretty excited. I am not speaking for Dale here at all. This is my own personal experience, but anybody remembers back before I picked up the stick bow, and even in 2017 I shot the compound. I was a pretty big proponent of two different heads, the NAP Kill Zone and the Gravedigger. And the Kill Zone, there's some tolerance issues. Not some, there's a significant amount of tolerance issues. So I quit using those and I stayed with the Gravedigger. When you got out of the company, it went to shit. Blades breaking, ferrules bending. I mean, the quality just went to hell in a handbasket. And so that was two broadheads I couldn't introduce or I didn't recommend anymore. In fact, I felt bad because people were buying the newer ones, and I'm like, hey, that's the newer stuff, man. I don't know what to tell you. So when you came out with this broadhead, I was super excited, and you had sent me some, and I shot a few animals with them. I had to goof around. I actually shot a couple with, and I get them not confused, whatever. But is the Jekyll the mechanical or the Hyde?
Hyde is the mechanical. So the easiest way to remember it is Hyde and hybrid. Gotcha.
So the Jekyll, I had loaded up a bunch of component weight and shot the 125 out of my stick bow, and both the mechanical or the hybrid and the fixed blade, you don't have any of those quality issues that I was having with your previous design when you got out of the company. And I've recommended that broadhead a lot especially on the mechanical side of things, or the hybrid side, because the good thing about this, broadhead when it comes to a mechanical, to me, is the way it opens and how it opens is unique. It's not like most mechanical broadheads or any really. One, and then two, you've got a fixed blade and a mechanical all in one, and you can actually turn one into the other and vice versa, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty cool. How long did it take you to come up with that?
Well, it's funny because that aspect and you go back a little bit to the quality issues that the Gravedigger had. Well, I mean, the simple term is it's sold in Walmart, and there's things you have to do to get into Walmart. So that's what created the quality issues. On the other hand, the new broadheads, the Jekyll and Hyde, or anything from Evolution Outdoors will never go into big box, ever. And we're looking at doing dealers, and that's great. I want to support the dealers, but yeah, we'll never go into big box. But in the design, what happened was, again, we designed the ferrule and are building them at AAE up in Prescott here in Arizona. So tolerances were the biggest thing. That is the biggest thing in broadheads, and people don't understand. Well, it's just a broadhead, but everything's about tolerances. And with a new design, I wanted just out of I don't know, it was almost on accident, came up with the idea that to be able to change the blade from a mechanical to a fixed and vice versa and have the same flight profile, because everything's based on the ferrule. Ferrule is your flight profile, and when you start changing ferrules going from a fixed to a mechanical, they fly differently. And so my idea was to be able to make those tolerances tight enough where a fixed blade will be tight, but mechanical blades will be loose enough to open. And so that's where our struggles came. And we had a few prototypes and a few issues that we had to fight through. But once we got it dialed in and we got the correct locking system and everything, it has just been phenomenal since then. I've killed with both. I'm kind of like you. I'm more of a hybrid guy when it's shooting compounds and stuff because I like the extra width. But I've had so many people really understand that you can switch between the two. And now a lot of our sales, they'll buy, a dozen broadheads or 6 broadheads of one kind, and they'll get replacement black packs of the other blades. So people are really starting to understand how the system works and what the benefits are.
It's kind of unique just because I shoot with a compound. I shoot fixed and mechanicals a lot of the times in the quiver. I'll have both. I didn't have any.
I do too.
Yeah, it's just sometimes one calls for one situation calls for another. But I haven't shot these past 80. But out to 80, it's the same. I can't say past that or what. I mean honestly, I haven't shot a compound enough. I don't have enough time with one to be, screwing around when I do shoot one. Usually it's for a specific purpose, like testing your broadhead. And I can say in good conscience that you can shoot with a tuned bow. If your bow sucks, don't quote me on this shit. But if your bow's tuned, you can shoot field points and both the Jekyll and Hyde out to 60 and 80 yards without issue, same point of impact. You might be, when I say that, as good as I can shoot. They might be a little bit lower than field points because of wind drag, but as far as paper plate, right, I can keep it in a paper plate as good as I can shoot at 80. I mean, there are those internet days where I can shoot tighter than a paper plate. But for the most part, on a bet, I can keep it in a paper plate at 80, and I can keep all 3 in. Now, I will say, generally, as a whole, there is a bit of wind drag difference with those heads, and you might want to bump. I didn't really see it at 60. At 70, I probably bumped half a pin down, and 80, I probably bumped half a pin down, which is probably 3 inches maybe of wind drag. Is that? Dale and I didn't talk about this shit ahead of time. So did you notice that, or was that my setup?
No, that's in general. That's in general on these broadheads. I mean, we took that front blade and sharpened it all the way around. So as you've seen aerodynamics, that wind comes off that front blade, and it's really clean. But when you get out to 80, it's super quiet. You get out to 80, you get out to 90 or 100, you're going to notice that, and it is purely that. It's purely wind drag. I'm the same way. 60 yards, they're spot on. 80 yards, I'm a little bit low. So again, guys that practice, if you want to practice at longer distances, which I wholeheartedly think people should, because it makes the short shots a slam dunk. You don't need to practice with broadheads at 80 yards or 90 or 100. You practice with field points. It's just reality. And then you sight your bow in and know that when you're practicing at that distance, you're going to hit a little bit high if you're shooting field points, if you're sighted in for broadhead.
I try to explain that to people ahead of time. Now, I do practice with broadheads for the final friendly line, right? That I
do too.
I practice with them all the time with a stick bow, but with a compound, I just sight in my bow hot, with the field tip, so vice versa, whatever you want to call it. Meaning, I got a yard or two extra on my 70 or 80 to make up for that wind drag, and again, I have to Sharpie circle my point of impact for my mechanicals fixed and my field points to get a median, and mode, because they are low. It's just I don't shoot good enough at 80 to. I have to, I could shoot 3 arrows and they could all be, one could be high that should be low and vice versa. But overall, you're going to get a 3 to, let's say, 6-inch drag at 80 with your heads, is what I found. Bottom of the plate, basically, or just below it.
Yeah, I find it to be at 80 yards about 3 inches and about 5 inches at 100. That's about the drop. And again, I'm not world-class shooter either, but I shoot enough to where I can consistently find that this broadhead or these arrows, broadheaded tipped arrows, are a little bit lower at that longer range. But at 60 yards, I mean, I'm pretty good. At 60 yards, I can hit a baseball all the time, and I don't find a difference at all.
Gotcha. Now, what are the build-up and components of the head? Because that's going to be one question. Nobody's going to Google it, right? There's always the people that are, going to message me, hey, what's it build up? What's it made of? Instead of looking it up. So why don't you simplify that for me? Okay. What's the build-up of the blade?
So we offer 4 versions of the broadhead, and again, both come in Jekyll and Hyde. So we have a 100-grain crossbow head, which is actually the same diameter as a crossbow arrow. And then that's made out of 70-75 aircraft aluminum. The blades are hardened 420 steel, stainless. And then all the components, the screws, are all made at an aerospace company. They make aerospace screws here in Goodyear, Arizona. And then that's the 100-grain. The 100-grain regular vertical bow broadhead is set for vertical bow shaft diameter, and it is made of the exact same component, 70-75 aircraft aluminum, same blades, same everything. The blades across the broadhead are all identical. The 125s are vented, and everything else, the 100s and the 150s, have a solid front blade, and that's just for weight control. The 125s are made out of 418 hardened steel, so they're almost bulletproof, and the 150s are made out of the same material, gotcha. The hardened steel.
And are you has there been anything since you've started that has been like a fuck type of a moment, or has everything went fairly smooth after the prototypes?
After the prototypes, okay, so nothing's perfect. I've already stated that, right? So in this design and changing the locking system to be more consistent, because that was one of the drawbacks of the Gravediggers. People would say, oh, I tightened it too much, I didn't tighten it enough. We tried to take that element out of it. So we're using a polymer pin. It was after many, many tries of different combinations. Nick and I at AE came up with, or Nick, I'm not going to say Nick's team came up with this polymer combination, and it's soft enough to just compress out of the way, but strong enough to hold it. So the downside to that is after you shoot something, sometimes it's a bitch to get out. I mean, and people complain, how do I get the goddamn pin out? You literally have to work it out with an Allen wrench. And so that's the only downside, but in your quiver, driving around, traveling, doing all that stuff, they never rattle loose because you get them, they're ready to hunt.
Let me chime in here because I'm a dumb shit and I don't read directions. So you sent me these. They came to the shop. This was a couple years ago, or over a year, probably a year ago.
A year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
a year ago.
I, like an idiot, I start popping open blades. And
yeah, that's what all of them now have. Don't open blades. They're ready to hunt.
So I literally, I'm not a direction reader. I'm like most men. So I open them and I'm like, these blades are loose. I'm gonna have to call Dale.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, well, I was like, this is stupid. And I have learned from making myself a dumb shit for over the course of time to not call immediately. Like, do a little more research. So I'm like, all right, I messed with these. These are still okay. So, and I pull on the other ones and I'm like, oh, okay, those are tight. And then I'm like, oh, there's a bag of clips here, or a little bag of pins. I'm like, okay, the brain is starting to work. Coffee's kicking in. I'm like, oh, I fucked these up out of the gate. That pin holds the blade. And so if you can imagine this for people listening, there's a center pin, we'll say, that's a polymer structure. And that center pin is what holds the blade from opening. So once you open the blade, it more or less busts the polymer or breaks open.
Yeah, mars it. Yeah, mars
it
down.
And so now I rigged up a system that was pretty slick with just a vise on my work table. And I have a little thing I clamp in, and I can just hold the broadhead and push that, and that marred what you're talking about with the polymer. It wasn't an issue for me to get out. Was it as easy when it was brand new? No. But for me, and hopefully people are tracking here, for a guy that has shot just about I think I've probably shot every broadhead known to man, both stick, bow, compound, everything. Blades opening up in your quiver suck. And anything with a rubber band, a slip cam system, shit rattles loose real easy. And what's nice with these, if you're in a foamless quiver, meaning a dual gripper quiver, they don't really rattle, right? They're pretty, if they are rattling, you fucked up and you broke that polymer pin on accident. So before you screwed them on, so they're tight. The thing that's nice is that polymer pin is durable enough that you can slide it in and out of foam. Once you've pre-punched the hole, you don't have to worry about that broadhead opening up or that pin marring, which is huge. So it's a very durable pin. When you're talking about, okay, so I give you an example. My wife, I bought a bunch of shitty Rage broadheads for her off of Amazon for turkey. Well, she's not exactly a pro, right? So she slides those things in and out of the quiver and shit. And she's like, she's Italian, right? She's, these fucking things keep opening. And I'm like, what? And
what the hell did you buy me, you cheap son of a bitch?
I looked at them and I literally, and I make jokes about that, and nothing against, whatever. I'm not a Rage guy. Some people are, whatever. Right. But I looked at it, I said, this is what happened when kids from college design shit. This is horrible to, for a whitetail. I'm not, sure it's fine, a tree stand, but if you can imagine, if you're running through the brush and you're pulling your arrow, you don't want to run with a broadhead on very far. So you're going through the brush, you're running, and your arrow's catching. It doesn't take much for a lot of those to open up. And with this center pin system, I call it a center pin, but it's this retention pin.
Retention pin, yeah.
It works extremely well. Now, like I said, the funny part is I'm busting them open playing with them, screwing everyone up. So then I'm like, okay, 2 + 2 = 4. I got to swap these out. And so I did. Now, the one thing I will say is I tested these up to a 100-pound bow, and I've had many broadheads open coming out of bows like that from the, that power stroke of the bow or whatever you draw cycle. Inertia. Thank you. And these don't do that. Now, the only other thing that I would, not caution, but make people understand is these, you're not going to probably sharpen the mechanical blade portion unless you have some mini fingers. You can swap out the fixed portion, or sharpen up the fixed portion, no problem. I always tell people it's a disposable kind of thing with the blade on the mechanical. You may be able to do it, but I usually tell people if you're going to test the broadhead, you can sharpen up the the fixed portion when you're talking about the hybrid.
Right.
But you're going to probably want to replace the mechanical blade portion. Some people can do it. But so it's something to think about if you're crafty, which, yeah, I just tell people swap them out. It's easier.
Yeah. It's really interesting because we've played with so many designs and people want to practice with them. And when we first came out with them, back the ones that you have, everybody wanted to practice with them. And again, broadheads really aren't designed to practice with unless you just take one and make it a practice head. And so we tried to come up with a practice blade that you could slide in like a Jekyll blade. That's a fixed blade that would mimic the exact design of the hide mechanical blades. And we were blowing them up just because of the impact of them, the way they were designed facing forward and stuff like that. So one of the things we did was go to this screw company, this aerospace company, and say, hey, can you make a screw that is super strong, tighten down, won't break, won't strip out, and is the exact right distance that length that we needed. So what we did was we made these new screws, and you can tighten down the blades. Now, you can tighten it down and make them tight so they quote unquote won't open. They'll still open in a target, but you can just retighten it each time you practice with them. And then you just take those off. Then you just unscrew it, put new blades on, and you're ready to go. Just switch out the poly run pin. So you can shoot it with the pin in it or without it. It's going to mar it. It's going to wreck it. But at the end of the day, you're shooting and practicing with the exact broadhead you're going to shoot. And then you can just, again, like you said, take those mechanical blades out, put new blades in, put a new polymer pin in, and you're ready to rock and roll.
Do you suggest any specific sharpening method for the fixed portion, or do you mess with those at all? Do you just swap those out as well?
I just swap them out. I'm more of a one and done, and I know they're expensive broadheads, but the ones that I do, I've noticed in shooting into targets, it actually kind of hones them a little bit. If you're going to practice with them, it will wear them down. But if you want to, say, hey, okay, I'm ready to go hunting. I've been practicing all year. Let me do a couple shots, like you said, at the end and get ready, make sure everything's right. I know guides here in Arizona that shoot them, and they'll take each one of their hunting heads and they'll shoot them into a foam target just to hone them. And they come out sharper than shit, man.
Oh, no kidding.
It is that honing. It's almost like stropping them, And, you try it once. Just take one broadhead, brand new, check the sharpness on it, and then shoot it through one foam target, and then take it out, and you'll feel the difference. And I'm not a huge proponent of razor sharp broadheads. There's always a giant debate on this, but when you have a razor sharp broadhead, that means you have almost no material at the edge of the broadhead, because that's the only way to get it that sharp. So when it hits a bone, that has a tendency to either roll over or, lose its sharpness. I believe in having them sharp that they're going to cut you, but not razor sharp. So there's some material there on that edge. So when it hits a bone and goes through, it still stays sharp and does its job going through the rest of the body.
Right. And I have to say, like, I have dove down the rabbit hole of, okay, so when you shoot
sharp?
Well, everything, right? So when you shoot a compound, you generally, you're let's say you're a 28.5, 29-inch draw and you're at 70 pounds. Okay. You're going to be somewhere in the 450 to 500 grain arrow. That's shifting a little bit now. Some guys are a little bit lighter, and you're going to shoot. There's multiple different types of broadheads. Generally, they're going to be $60 to, well, unless you buy real shitty ones, but $50 to $60 a pack of 3, roughly.
Right.
And that's generally an aluminum ferrule, usually, not always, and it's going to be a broadhead that is not it's not a big CNC 1P. It's not a trad head, right? You buy them, shoot them, you throw them away when you're done. They last a little while, they don't, whatever. It's just a different mentality than the traditional archery world. I found, right? It was an eye opener.
Correct.
I had never thought about sharpening a broadhead in my life, right? I have practice heads, and then I screw on the other heads and I kill with them, and it's kind of a one and done for the most part thing for me. Or in mechanicals were the same way. If they were still good, great, clean them up, swap out the head. Then I got into traditional archery where you would never say that out loud in a group because you might get hung in the courtyard and stoned to death. They don't do that shit. And I'm like, well, I like, I was one of those guys, I'm
like your extra time?
Well, I'm like, I like mechanicals, right? Like I like a big hole and well, they can break, and they can, there are shitty mechanicals out there.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
That's where a lot of this comes from too, where when you're talking about a mechanical blade head compared to a 200 grain or 150 grain, or, you look at, and, I work with multiple different broadhead companies. If you want a broadhead that is 30 some bucks a head or $100 for 3, you are going to get a potentially higher quality material. You're going to get a lot of different things, but you're going to have to pay for that. And so when you look at something like titanium ferrules, very, very high-end steel ferrules, things like that, you can do that, but you're going to be paying for that shit. And right. People have to understand. I'm sure you being a guy supplying them, you probably deal with both sides of the fence where guys are 100%. No, I agree with Dale. There's going to be people listening in, sending me hate mail and positive feedback for both sides. Like, I can already see the emails I'm going to get in, like, Dale's full of shit. What's he talking about? And then there's going to be guys like, oh, yeah, Dale's right. I've been saying that for years. And, of course, everybody sits in their corner, and they know they're right, even though there's no real right. There's personal preference.
So my analogy is this. There was a article years ago, and I think it was in Bowhunter magazine. And this is what created me, the beginning of starting my own broadhead company, or trying to design my own broadhead. So I was hunting, and I was shooting a fixed broadhead with a buddy of mine. And it's a very sharp, very small fixed broadhead that is on the market today. And I watched him gut shoot a deer at 40 yards. I physically watched through binoculars that deer leave the valley a mile away. Never stopped. I mean, it ran for a little while and then literally walked away, because that broadhead was so sharp and small, it didn't do any damage. It just zipped through the animal. And the article basically was, when you cut yourself with a razor or a paper cut, you usually don't know that you're cut. And so you continue to work, and it won't stop bleeding because the whatever the hell they're called, the blockers in your blood don't go to the site because it doesn't know it's injured. So you get a better blood trail. That was the premise behind this article. But on the other side of the coin, if you hit yourself with a hammer on the finger, what do? You cuss like hell, you go over, and you sit down, and you stop doing what you're doing. So when I created my broadhead, I had so many people tell me I made a bad shot. The animal went 40 yards and laid down because it fucked it up. And that's the difference. If you make a perfect shot, awesome. But broadheads aren't about your perfect shots. Broadheads are about your bad shots.
See, this is going to end up being a better podcast than I thought, because there will be a lot of response from this. So and this is because of the stick bow, right? Coming from the compound to the stick bow. 100% I'd be one of the best. I probably shot 30 or 40 animals with your head, somewhere in that neighborhood. A pile of does, hogs, elk, bunch of shit. And I mean, other than the fact once they took over and they were breaking, but before that, they left a hell of a hole. Yeah, they left a hell of a hole. I mean, they were pretty impressive. So my going to the stick, I had to, I went from, I always shot pretty heavy point weight, 175 up front or so, give or take, and I always shot heavy poundage, so I could shoot whatever I want.
Well,
so,
yeah, you're an anomaly though in a stick bow, because most people are shooting 45 pounds.
So, well,
they're not shooting heavy poundage in a stick bow.
I was a bit of an anomaly, somewhat on the compound side.
Well, you're an anomaly anyway.
Suede. Well, and I gotta tell people, I have to remind people, like, hey, I was shooting 85 pounds with a 580 grain arrow. I can shoot whatever I want, right? You gotta
anywhere you wanted to.
Yeah,
right.
you gotta take that into consideration. But when I went to a stick bow, I'm shooting 60 pounds or so, and a little bit more than that now, and 600 grain arrow. And what's funny, like I just set up Dudley sent me a compound, right? And so I saw
that.
I just took my trad arrows, cut 2.5 inches off, and I'm shooting basically the same arrow. I dropped the point weight from.
You said I'm shooting trad veins.
Oh yeah, I went from 2 inches.
Badass, by the way.
Oh, they work good, but I went from 200 up front to 125. Bare shaft out to 50. Guys are like, I don't believe that, and I'm like, if you want, before I post the video, I want to bet you money, and I mean a lot. Because I'm going to make you look stupid. Because I'm not saying everyone can do this. It just worked out that way, right? That's just
right.
Sometimes you get bows that tune that way. Okay, so with broadheads though, I went from shooting what we're talking about, the $50 to $60 heads. I say disposable, and I kind of mean that. Like, the ones I practice with end up being disposable. I shoot an animal. That was kind of the end of it. You might get more than one animal, but I always just figured it as, I'm going to get an animal out of it, and at least need to totally replace the blades. Ferrule will probably still be good, usually.
Correct.
And then I went to the stick, and oh my God, I'm looking at these giant freaking broadheads, like 200, 250, 300 grains. I don't know how to sharpen. I'm like, what the hell do I do with this thing, right? And I will say, like shooting a mechanical, you're going to lose momentum to get the blades to open. No matter what shit people feed you, you're going to lose some momentum. And so the one thing I was surprised about is what I was blowing through shooting a whopping 180 feet per second. But I'm shooting now a cut-on contact, 1 in a 16th, single bevel or double bevel broadhead in comparison. Now, what I'm trying to bring home here is I'm going to get more penetration with that. I started shooting a little bit wider heads, and I had Chris Rowe with Rowe Hunting Resources on, and he was just loaded with both barrels. I need to talk to you. I got a bone to pick with you, and he loves to argue. He's got a PhD in arguing, right? I had some guys shooting heavy point, so whatever, and they shot whitetail in the stomach, and they said, you told, and I'm like, I didn't tell them shit. I didn't say that. I'm a huge proponent of a giant hole. Why do you think I shoot a 2-inch fixed blade out of a freaking, looks like an axe? I'm like, there is no doubt.
You can't get that to fly at 300 feet per second.
Shit, no. But, I mean, people have to understand there is a time, space, and place for everything. If you are low poundage and everything else, you're going to have to shoot a fixed blade, right? If you need, if you're shooting certain situations, and you're going to have to deal with a smaller hole. I mean, that's just, you're screwed. But you hit something in the grass basket or whatever, and I you think of a 223 to a 338 Lapua.
It's the exact same analogy.
Yeah,
you can kill shit all day long with a 223 if you hit it in the right spot.
Yeah, but I tell you what, you hit it wrong with a 338, it ain't going far, right? It's just not
going far.
Yeah, he's in pain.
Yeah, and that's one of the, and you talk about fixed head. So this in the Jekyll are fixed versions, which behind the story behind the two names is Jekyll and Hyde, which is one person. It's two personalities, and that's why this is called the Jekyll and Hyde. It's one ferrule with two personalities, and so that's kind of the reasoning behind the names. But the Jekyll, and one of the new things we did with the front blade and on the fixed blade of the Jekyll is it sharpened all the way around. So for people that are shooting lighter poundage, people that aren't getting pass-throughs, and for whatever reason, a lot of people, like I have a friend of mine right now. He drew a bull tag in Arizona. He killed a giant bull at 380 something last year and drew the same tag again this year, dick. But anyway, and he shot it with a hide. And so he'll shoot this bull or shoot a bull this year with a hide. But then he has a moose hunt. He wants to use the Jekyll. So people have a tendency to graduate up to a fixed blade based on the size of the animal. Myself, it wouldn't matter to me because I'm confident shooting either one. But in that, the thought process is I may not get a pass through. I might need more energy, whatever. And I know you're familiar with the buck I shot on the strip a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I lost that buck for a day because I only got one lung of penetration. Shot him at a long fucking ways away. But I wanted something to change. And when I designed this new head, I sharpened the blades on the back side. So it does damage. If you don't get full penetration, it does damage going out. And I have told people, and I've had people shoot, and myself, I've shot stuff with the Jekyll. And if you get that broadhead in them, that animal's dead. Because it's cutting every direction every time it moves.
Right. And I showed Amy that, my wife, right, because we were talking, explaining to her what you and I are talking about. There's a lot more shit talking when I'm talking to her because I'm not being recorded with all the different various sides of the fence, right? Like, I mean, like right now, with that broadhead, when you talk about, you shot it a long ways away and everything else. And I don't do that anymore, but I was really good at it at one time. Now I'm getting, that's like what you shot that's like a par 4 for me. But the general principle of the matter, if you're against long distance shooting, okay, that's fine. But it's still the same principle. When the arrow gets in the animal, it's cutting in 4 Dale's a dick. He shot it far away, whatever you want to say. People still do it. And it happens close up. When that arrow's in there and it runs off, and anyone that's seen this happen, the body of that animal is making that arrow flip around. And that head is cutting everything inside when it's doing that front, back, sideways, and every other direction.
Right. And that's broadheads, again, back to the original story. Broadheads are about devastation. What they do to the animal when it goes through. And you get these guys that argue, well, it's all about shot placement. It's hunting. Shit happens. I mean, it's just that simple. And so when it's not about shot placement all the time. Yes, everybody aims for a certain spot, but everybody doesn't hit that spot.
Man, well, guys, I had Gillingham on here, and he's a nut, right?
Oh, my God, yes. He's the biggest proponent about shot placement.
Oh, well, and that's the thing. You've got these Ashby guys that hate Gillingham, right? Because he's like,
right.
Well, just don't suck, right? Don't prepare for... Just don't hit it in the shoulder, dummy, right? Like that's his, so he's like, he's on here like, I have seen no issue with a 375 grain arrow and a mechanical. And I'm like, whoa, Tim, let's not, Jesus, you're as bad as the fucking Ashby guys. You're just on the other side of the fence. Like,
you're just the other side of the fence.
Yeah. There's like a happy medium. And so, for example, my wife, she's got a 27.5-inch draw, 46 pounds. And when I set her up with an arrow, I put a 50 grain brass insert in, 100 grain point. She's got a decent amount, 150 up front. And she's shooting a 410, I think, grain arrow. Not a barn burner. I think she's at 240 or something out of her bow. But like she hit an oudad in the ass, and it jumped right when she shot, and it went through the femoral, through the ass cheek and up into the stomach. So pretty good penetration. So, when you set up but as I'm saying this, I would not have an issue with her shooting a mechanical at some whitetails. And people will be like, oh my God, whatever. And I'm like, hey, look, if she hits it in the shoulder, it doesn't matter. There's nothing on the front of that arrow that's going to put it through that.
It's going to get through it.
Yeah. And so
I agree.
I'm like, if that animal ducks, if it jumps forward, I need to make sure she's got the best chance of hitting. Now, she did shoot her whitetails this year with a fixed blade broadhead, but there are times that the animal jumps, catching the liver, putting a bigger hole in the liver. Those are all the things, and people need to weigh that out. And if you're like, screw mechanicals, they can fail. Fair enough. Don't shoot one, right? Shoot a fixed. But I guarantee, and I talk about this all the time, gear is the same way, right? You're like, I'm not going ultralight. I'm going to be prepared. You backpack in 7 miles, get your ass handed to you because you're so prepared. Your pack weighs 65 pounds. You're coming back, and you're going to have a coming to Jesus meeting with yourself.
You can't hunt because you're fucking wore out.
Well, yeah, and so the next time, now you're going ultralight. You backpack in 7 miles, and you're like, holy fuck, a storm came in. That was painful. All right, back to the drawing board. Broadheads are the same way. You can be so steadfast in your opinion of a broadhead until something goes wrong, and then it'll change it. And that could be you shot 17 animals in a row, pinwheeled every one, and your system worked great. And then that 18th animal, you got too much into the scapula, and you didn't get, your light arrow didn't work. It happened to my buddy Cody. That light arrow didn't work. He went from 410 to 515 arrow weight because he
just that day. He's like, screw this. I want to get through it.
He had a 200-inch whitetail up in the shoulder, which I guarantee he would have went through with either one, a heavier arrow, or two, a fixed blade, right? And I'm not even sure what the fixed would have done it. And he's not going to shoot a fixed blade, or at least not a stereotypical.
Right.
And that's that coming to Jesus meeting with yourself that you have, and you're like, I'm changing. And then eventually in life, you're to the point where you and I are, where you're like, oh, I fucking know what I'm going to use. I'm good with it. I don't care. Jesus Christ can come down and tell me I'm wrong. I'm still using it. I'm confident in that system, and you have the experience behind it to choose one or the other. And which is probably why you made the Jekyll and the Hyde, is you'll shoot both depending upon the situation.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I mean, I shot one of the deer I killed on Kodiak. I shot him with the Jekyll. I still have no idea where that arrow could still be flying, because that broadhead but I shot him right through the lungs. He went 10 yards, still over dead. I mean, those are easy shots. It's when you don't make great shots. And I've had my staff guys, I shot a javelina and I didn't get good blood. It's like, well, where the fuck did you shoot him? Well, I shot him high in the lungs. Well, yeah, because all the blood's inside of it. And so people tend to blame or rely on the broadhead.
Oh, there's no tend to. They do. It's always the broadhead's fault.
It's always the broadhead's fault. Yeah, welcome to my world, man. And so it's just a situation. I shot a doe in Texas at 25 yards, and I mean pinwheeled her. And it was right before dark and out of a blind. I mean, it was just, okay, she's dead. Went over, picked up the arrow full of blood, not a drop of blood anywhere. I mean, not a drop. And I'm like, what in the world? I did circles and circles and circles. And I'm like, there's no blood. The only blood was on the arrow, and which completely passed through the doe. And I'm like, this is crazy. The guide showed up, picked me up. I'm like, let's walk around, flashlights, couldn't find nothing. Went back and got the dog. That deer died 25 yards under a bush. We couldn't find it. There was no blood. And what had happened is she had one leg forward and one leg back. And when I shot her right underneath the armpit. Well, when she went to run, she closed that hole. And basically the fat in her body clogged both sides. There was no blood. So every person, it wouldn't have been a dog or whatever to find that, every person would have said, oh, it was a broadhead's fault.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bring this back to a fixed blade story of the same principle. Tom Klum shot a massive bull, and everybody thought it because he didn't get blood. He shot it with his broadhead. They have a cutthroat. It's like it's a CNC one piece. It's a tread head, right? I mean, you shoot it with compound, single bevel.
Right.
Well, he didn't. He shot it with a big ass 3-blade. No blood, right? And the same thing happened when it shifted. One leg was forward, one was back. When it shifted,
yep,
the skin went back to its natural place and kind of covers the hole in the fat and everything else. And again, and I deal with enough of this, and I've shot enough, and just flat out realized that it's generally not ever the broadhead's fault. I would say 98% of the time, it doesn't have to do with the broadhead. And when guys say, oh, I shot my mechanical, it didn't open. Well, when I pulled it out of the dirt, it wasn't open. I'm like, now that is one of the
we
dumbest.
got that a lot.
Yeah, that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. Right? It definitely opened from the dirt. It just closed when you pulled it back out. Whatever type. Well, I shot a doe this year with a full on crazy ass trad head. It went 380 yards double lung, no lie, and whatever, it was alert when I shot it. And the reason I know it went 380 yards is if I wasn't 20 feet up in a tree, I would have never found it because I watched it run through the fucking prairie of Oklahoma. And I'm watching, I'm like, okay, obviously I imagined where I hit it because I didn't hit it where I thought I hit it. And then it runs and it dies. And I'm like, I filmed the whole thing. And I'm like, hey guys, this is a prime example of you think you know something and you don't. Because I would have bet any amount of money, never would have made it that far. And that's where the devastation comes from. When you need, I guarantee if I would have hit that with a bigger head, wouldn't have done that. And
you rocked her world.
Oh, yeah. Well, you talk about the high hits. No matter what, when you pierce the thoracic cavity, if you pierce it high, that thoracic cavity, the chest cavity, has to fill up with blood before it pumps out of the top, and it's still not very good. And so you don't get a lot of blood. It's not the broadhead's fault. It's the anatomy of an animal. It's got to fill up that chest cavity. So you hit one low right above the brisket, and it skims the top. It's going to pump out blood like a faucet, usually.
Oh yeah.
And so...
And angles are a big thing. Dead, strap, flat, broadside shots are nothing like shooting something quartering away or quartering two. I mean, you see these pictures posted, well, this is a whatever head, and it's this 5-inch long gash. And it's like, yeah, you didn't shoot that animal broadside. You shot it quartering away, and it cut it on its way down the side of the body. So when you see all these things, and I'm talking to the people out there, when you see all these pictures of what kind of damage does it do? That's all based on angle of the broadhead going in. That's it. That's all it is.
Well, I'm going to tell a story, and this is about the last animal I shot with your head, but after the company was taken over, and people have heard this story before. I shot high wind, eastern Colorado, fairly close shot the deer, and it pivoted extremely hard and went right down the hide and the body, right?
Mm-hmm.
It literally was naked from the Alex Nestor, and he'll verify this story. He pops the binos up, and he's like, "Oh my God, what'd you shoot that with?" Now, this isn't a good story. We didn't get the deer, right? It pivoted so hard, I literally ripped the hide off for 14 inches down the body. However it happened, I have no idea. And 8 inches high, it was naked. It looked like I hit it with a bazooka. And what had happened? But
it never got in the chest cavity.
Never got the chest cavity. And guys, you talk about devastation. I'm sure it dropped out of property we couldn't get on, and I'm sure it froze to death. It didn't have any hair on half its freaking body. And that wouldn't have mattered mechanical or fixed or whatever. If you go down the hide in the body, it's just happening. But, you talk about that angled shot. When you hit something on an angled shot, or let's say you get penetration and the shoulder moves, that animal's doing, you go into the shoulder, into the scapula, and that animal moves. It's doing more damage to itself when it's doing it because it's ripping the hole open from its leg moving. And it's very subjective, and I try to explain that to people, and it's hard to come across correctly.
Yeah, hunting's hunting. I mean, otherwise it'd be called killing, and all. Well, that probably wouldn't be real popular either. But, but I mean, it just stuff happens, and at the end of the day, you're just trying to mitigate and give yourself enough opportunity to be in a good position to be, take a quality animal and trust your product. I mean, people always say, well, Dale, what do you shoot? What do you prefer? Fixed or mechanical? And it's like, it really doesn't matter to me because obviously I designed them both and I'll shoot both at any given moment. But the bottom line is when you draw your bow, you have to believe in the product that you're shooting. Yeah. And I've never asked somebody to switch mine's better or whatever. I mean, I believe that my product is the best on the market for what it does. But if you believe what you're using is better, then don't switch, because you can't have second guessing in your mind when you're coming to full draw on an animal, because there's enough shit going through your mind that you can't be thinking about your equipment.
Oh, for sure. And I won't, of course, you probably won't like this statement. I will say that your mechanical head is, I would be very confident in saying it's the best mechanical head on the market. A mechanical head is different than a fixed. Like, you can only, I mean, your fixed blade broadhead's
Correct.
good, but I think where you shine the most is the fact you can swap them and make one the other. That's huge. But your mechanical, I have told people, I highly suggest it, because I think it's the best mechanical on the market. And there's several other good ones. But, when you go to a fixed head, is your fixed head the best? I'd have a hard time saying yours the best. It's a great option. It's nice. You can switch both, but there's a lot of good fixed heads, and yours is very good. Your mechanical, though, I would say it is the best. I always say never say best. It is one of the best mechanical broadheads.
It is one of the best broadheads. Yeah, let's go with that. I can accept that.
I would for me, like, it's the mechanical broadhead of choice for me, and there's some other good ones, but the thing is since you have that fixed on the front and the mechanical on the back, that is huge for me. The way that they open, you don't have to worry about them rattling and everything else. So again, your fixed head, I can see how guys would argue there's certain other types, or a cut on contact. There's a lot of variables there. I get it, but the mechanical, it's I mean, you did good, man. It's pretty freaking impressive. And you also partnered up with Valkyrie, didn't you? You got the center pin thing going. You guys got something in the works with that?
I did. Brent reached out to us, and he had asked if we would be interested in building some of our heads with his center pin design. And so we looked at everything, and we did, and those are ready to be. We have them done and built for him, so we're getting ready to ship those out to him so he can. I know he did some pre-order stuff for a lot of the guys out there, and so those should be available anytime. But yeah, it's been an interesting thing. I mean, the system is spot on for me. I change my stuff a little bit more than most people do, but if you run that system, it's a great option. And right now we're sending him the hide version, because obviously he makes his own fixed heads. But if you wanted to buy the hides in that version, and then you could come on and buy the Jekyll blades on our website and switch them back and forth.
Cool. Well, man, tell everybody before we hop off here, where can they, what's the website? Where can they find everything to take a look at them?
So we're at evolutionoutdoors.com, and we're doing free shipping, and we dropped the price a little bit just because of this whole craziness, and hopefully everybody will get back to work here soon, and Arizona's opening up. And you can find us on Facebook or Instagram at The Evolution Outdoors. And we'd love to hear your feedback. If you've bought it or any questions that you have, go ahead and reach out to us, and hopefully we can answer all that stuff for you.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate you hopping on. And again, I really like the system. The mechanical is definitely, like I said, super badass, and it's cool. You can swap back and forth from them. So anybody, looking at them, I highly suggest them. And I appreciate the friendship and working together over the years off and on. I probably broke your heart when I went to a stick bow, because I was like, dude, I'm not shooting these I'm shooting a different system. But now
I'm like, no. Okay.
Yeah,
I get it. Dude, and you're impressive with a stick bow. I mean, you have risen to the top of that thing, and it's hard work, and you put the work in, and you're one of the people that do. And obviously you're going to be successful at whatever you do, because you have that drive, and you have the sensibility to understand what you can and can't do.
Yeah, I try not to suck. That's I tell people. Like if you're not
That's what I
good at,
tell people too.
yeah, if you don't like sucking, you're probably gonna be good at what you do because you'll work hard at it. But well,
Right.
cool, man. I appreciate you coming on, and we may end up getting you on again to kind of do a follow up to maybe answer some of the questions that come through on this and everything else. But yeah, thanks again, man.
Sounds good.
All
I'll
right,
talk to you later.
take it easy.